All right, snowman project people, get ready to assemble your snowman. If you are doing a separate hat and body piece, then stay tuned. I'm about to give you a preliminary step that you need to complete before you watch the rest of the video. If your hat and body are the same material, they're cut as a single piece, skip ahead to this timestamp. My hat people, each of your pieces has a right side and a wrong side. That goes for the body and for the hat. So before you begin the rest of this part of the project where you're assembling, you're going to need to connect your hat to your body. What I want you to do is line up the edge of that extra little bit that you cut onto the head of the snowman and the extra little bit you cut onto the bottom of the hat so that they are touching. Right sides should be facing up. Wrong sides should be touching your work surface. Then what I would like you to do is flip the hat down on the body, keeping the edges that you had touching lined up. Center the piece of fabric if you need to. Then that little 1/4 inch bit of excess, you are going to sew along that line. Take a marker and a straight edge and mark for yourself a line of stitching. You can use a running stitch for this. That will be sufficiently strong because this particular line is not going to take a lot of stress. Do the exact same thing on your other two pieces. Stitch the hat to the body for both sides of your snowman. Once you have done that, come and join me at the ironing board. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you are attaching a hat to a snowman, then you have now completed that step. You have stitched your hat to your snowman using that 1/4 inch seam allowance that we created when we cut the pattern out. But before we can do anything else, we need to flatten that seam open. So what we're going to do is take the two little flippy flappies, the two little tiny bits of excess, and we're going to fold them over so that that seam is laying open and flat like that. Okay, so we don't want them sticking up like they were before. We don't want to be able to see that line of stitching. We are going to fold them over and then use the iron to press them flat. So that's going to look like this. And I'm applying a little bit of pressure while my iron is sitting right on top of my seam. And then I'll pull it away. And there we go. Easy as all that. I'm going to do the same thing to the other piece. I'm just going to press open my seam so that I've got a nice flat piece of material. So again, right now, that little seam allowance is sticking up and I'm able to see my line of stitching, and I don't want to be able to see my line of stitching. So what I'm going to do is open those flaps, fold them away from each other. Then I'm going to take my iron and press them into place. And once my iron is right above them, I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure, move the iron away. Perfect. Lovely flat seams. We are now ready to begin assembling our toy snowman. If you are going to put any kind of decoration on the front of your toy, for example, if you want to sew on some button eyes, now is the time to do that. So before you begin, figure out which is the right side, which is the wrong side, and if you are going to put button eyes on your snowman or buttons down his center front or any kind of embroidery, may I recommend going ahead and doing that now before you do anything else. This is what I decided to do with mine. All I've done is sewn on some buttons for an eyes, a nose, and some shirt buttons down his front. So once you have got the decorations that you want to add sewn on to your snowman, you are ready to begin assembling him. The first thing that you are going to do is put your two pieces both right sides facing up. Then you are going to flip one of them over on top of the other, kind of like you're making a sandwich, so that the right sides are touching each other and one of the wrong sides is up. Line up all of your edges. If you are working with a slippery material, it would be a good idea to run a central loop of basting stitches just to hold the pieces together until you can get seam allowances marked for the next step. However, if you're working with pieces that want to stay in place and aren't going to slide off against each other, then you are going to take your seam gauge or your ruler or your tape measure, and you're going to mark 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the edge of your snowman, except for the top of the top hat. Don't mark anything in the top of the top hat. Once you have marked your 1/4 inch seam allowance everywhere except for the top of the top hat, then you are ready to sew along the stitching line that you have marked. You are going to use a back stitch for this project. You're going to use a back stitch because back stitches can handle stress. This toy is going to get stuffed pretty full with filler. And if it's a toy that's well loved, it's going to get squeezed a lot, which is going to put pressure on these seams from the inside. Anytime his little tummy gets squeezed, all of that filler is going to press against the seams and put strain and stress on them. For that reason, we're going to use a back stitch going all the way around. Once you have done that, you are ready for the next step.